Last week, I went through every movie that I watched throughout 2023, and by the end of the video, I narrowed the list down to my top 10 favorite movies of the year. Today, I am going to rank them going from number 10 up to my number 1 movie of the year. Keep in mind that these are all my own personal opinions based on my experience with the movies throughout the year. I should also give a general warning for potential spoilers for each of the 10 movies discussed today. I will do my best to avoid talking about big events in each movie, but in order to fully explain why I loved watching them, I will need to reference some specific details that might be a bit spoilery. With that being said, let's get started with... Watching movies can be very cathartic. Sometimes you just need something to get out your frustrations, and luckily for me, The Wrath of Becky provided me with that release. For those of you who listened to the Bydmoc podcast review episode about the original movie Becky, you already know how I feel about this unexpected sequel. This movie leans very heavily into the comedic, gory action, as the lead character, Becky, goes on a rampage killing the main antagonists of the film. In the original movie, Becky slaughters a group of neo-Nazis led by Kevin James. And in this one, she brutally murders a group of people calling themselves the Noblemen, led by Seann William Scott. Scott does a great job at playing a convincing villain here, and it is very satisfying once Becky, played by Lulu Wilson, finally gets her revenge. Many of the movies that make my favorites list every year take those top spots due to some deeper meaning or emotional theme. But that is not necessarily a requirement. Sometimes it is enough to just be a fun and campy gore fest to help me unwind, which is precisely why The Wrath of Becky finds itself at the number 10 spot for the year. I always love when a movie manages to surprise me with a phenomenal dramatic performance out of an actor I know from a more traditional comedic role. Somewhere in Queens features two of my favorite performances of the year from Ray Romano and Laurie Metcalf, and it is a little upsetting that I have not heard much about either of them at all going into the awards season. Romano's directorial debut tells the story of an Italian-American family living in Queens simply going about their day-to-day lives. It explores the lengths a father, Ray Romano, would go to just to ensure his son, Jacob Ward, has a more successful life than he did. There is also the question of how each individual defines success in their own life, as the son pushes back against what his father blindly pushes him towards. Meanwhile, we see the mother, Laurie Metcalf, battling with the thought of letting go of her child as he prepares to leave for college. This movie also deals with the very vague and yet very relatable theme of fear. It often caught me off guard in how emotionally charged the movie was. And I don't mean that in a negative way. At no point does the emotion feel forced in this movie. And that really comes down to the performances from the main cast. Each character comes across as a real person, and the entire movie feels as though we are looking into the lives of a real family. If this is the type of quality I can expect from Ray Romano directing dramas, then I would love to see more from him. A few years ago, I was introduced to an animated love story which relied on a body-switching plot, and it instantly became one of my favorite movies of all time. As a matter of fact, Your Name is one of the few movies that I consider to be close to flawless. Needless to say that because of this, there are always absurdly high expectations whenever director Makoto Shinkai puts out a new project. So when I sat down to watch Suzume this year, I did my best to go in without the expectation of greatness. While the animation is stunning and the characters are engaging enough for the story being told, I have to admit that the movie failed to hit me with that same feeling that Your Name did. I was more taken in by the quirkiness of a character being turned into a chair and the demonic worm causing earthquakes, as opposed to the charm of the characters or the themes that were being set up. Then, once I made it to the climax of the movie, I was hit with the realization of exactly what the movie had been building to throughout the runtime. This is a beautiful story about finding the meaning in life, and how sometimes people get lost in the search of that meaning. As someone who has struggled, and continues to struggle on occasion, with some of the darker thoughts alluded to in this movie, once that realization came to me, the emotion present in those final scenes was overwhelming. I cannot honestly say that I feel the movie is quite as good as Your Name, simply because the first 2/3 are a bit too stretched out, but the animation and amazing last third of the movie make this a story that I will continue to think about and return to for years to come. Some movies that try to build that slow tension fail miserably, and it creates an uncomfortable situation, because you can see what the director is going for, but it just ends up being boring. Then you have the movies that understand how to build tension through the use of music and specifically framed shots. These are the movies that make you feel uncomfortable without feeling forced into that position, and that is the spot in which we find Leave the World Behind. A story of two families that find themselves having to work together to figure out what is actually happening during a sudden blackout. Let me just take this moment to say that I have never been more terrified of deer. I won't give away too much, since I feel this movie is best if you figure things out along with the characters, but I want to touch upon some of the things that this movie is trying to say, because I think that it leaves a lot open for discussion by the end and never fully commits to spelling out the messages present. This movie definitely feels like it was made by an older generation, as it spends a good deal of time blaming the decline of society on younger generations who are obsessed with screens, whether that's shows, movies, games, or anything else. It wants the audience to walk away realizing that we cannot just ignore the problems in our world by investing time into characters in a show. And the way it presents this is by having the youngest character so obsessed with seeing the finale of Friends that she just ignores all of the danger in the environment around her. And I don't fully believe that that's a fair critique. I agree that people are more concerned with the well-being of fictional characters rather than the well-being of their fellow humans, which was caused by an overabundance of screen time leading to social detachment, but I do not think that this is a problem that exists solely within the younger generation. So while I appreciate the message, I feel that the way it was framed within the movie is a bit too exaggerated and also comes across as pointing a finger at a specific age group. Even with that, I think this movie is masterfully crafted, and the performances from the entire cast are fantastic. Mahershala Ali and Julia Roberts are particular standouts here. I find it a bit amusing that Disney gets so much hate from certain groups for being too woke by shoving diversity down the throats of its audience, and then the main examples of this end up being a 2-second kiss between a gay couple that gets removed for foreign releases, or an implied relationship between two male characters, or a fictional creature having a non-white skin color, especially when as a company they just cancel any idea that might actually be truly progressive. We actually saw one of those movies this year. When Disney canceled the project, I do not believe that they saw Netflix picking up and releasing Nimona, but I am sure glad that they did. Even with a bit of groan-inducing TikTok humor that is unfortunately typical in animated movies, this script manages to deliver some actual good jokes. More importantly, though, is that the script manages to deliver some incredibly important messages about gender identity and oppression in such a way that people who see that connection will feel seen, and people who take it at face value will not feel lectured. Honestly, I did not go into this movie expecting much more than a fun Disney-style animated fantasy about a disgraced knight and a morphling, but what I ended up seeing is a movie that modern Disney could never even dream of making. A movie full of emotion that had me bawling by the end of it. It has heart, it has humor, and it has soul. Even though I think that Suzume had the better animation, as a full package, Nimona is my favorite animated movie of the year. Now this may be surprising to hear, but I was never a preteen girl. It's a shock, I know. Since I don't have that experience under my belt, I went into Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, not really expecting it to resonate with me. I watched it for two reasons and two reasons only. The first reason is that I was bored. The second reason is Rachel McAdams. Now we have reached the end of the year, and here we are with this movie in my top 5 favorites. Now I'll come out and say up front that in this house we believe in Rachel McAdams and Kathy Bates' supremacy. These two are queens and will always be given the respect that they deserve. Here, they deliver two fantastic performances as always, and I would be lying if I said that they were not a big reason for why I love this movie. However, there is much more to it than just these two performances. Some of the themes tackled in this movie I simply did not expect. It seemed pretty obvious that I was likely to see some of the typical preteen girl movie tropes. We have the changing bodies, boys, parties, popularity, raging against parents, all of that stuff that I expected. What I did not expect was when the movie touched upon religion. Perhaps that was just me being oblivious to the book that this was based on, but I honestly never expected there to be a question about different belief systems, and the effect that that can have on a family. Within this story of a young woman lies some truly poignant truths about how religious beliefs can fracture the relationships in our lives. I think the theme of this overall year in movies was movies that made me cry when I wasn't expecting them to, and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret fits neatly into that group as well. When I was younger, I would lean towards the overly dramatic films with long monologues and actors fully committing to outward displays of emotion. The general rule of thumb was that if at some point an actor got loud and cried, then that was a fantastic performance and a great emotional movie. As I've gotten older, I have grown to appreciate the subtle emotions in movies. And I am so happy that I did, because perhaps a decade ago, I would have completely overlooked Past Lives. Even now, in making my final ranking for the top 10, this movie continues to move up the more I think about it. When I started, I had this movie at number 9, and it just continues to overtake the other titles as I am currently writing the script out. Who knows, maybe in a week, I'll look back and be devastated that I did not push it even higher up the list. Now, this is not a very flashy movie, and it does not feature any intense drama about a love triangle, or really any big central conflict. It is simply a very honest look at how people change and drift apart over the course of time, and the emotional impact that that can have on us. This is definitely a challenging movie for those with short attention spans, as it really is just people talking about how they feel. But within the subtle emotions shown and the smart dialogue, there lies some deep truths that we all must live with. Even though there is a lack of any specific memorable moments, the general themes and emotions in this film have stuck with me since I watched it. And the more I think about it, the more it grows on me. Maybe I'll have to revisit this list at some point in the future, just to see if Past Lives has retroactively made its way to the number 1 spot. Who would have thought that a 3-hour biopic would have been one of the most impactful movies of the year? Christopher Nolan has always been an interesting director to me. Even though if I look at his filmography, I think I only truly love less than half of the movies he has made, I will still get excited for any project he chooses to work on. Luckily, Oppenheimer joins the group of movies that I love for many reasons. The first reason being that it has two of my favorite performances of the year, in Cillian Murphy, who plays Oppenheimer, and Robert Downey Jr., who plays Louis Strauss. While Murphy has some stiff competition in the race for Best Actor, I don't think I have seen any performance this year that has even made a run at RDJ for Best Supporting Actor. Emily Blunt is good as well, although I think as a character in the movie she was not given enough time to actually build herself up at all. Matt Damon and Florence Pugh also give good performances in their roles. Performances aside, we can also discuss the technical side of this film. Visually, this movie is stunning, and even the sound mixing, which is normally an issue with Christopher Nolan's movies, was on point. As a matter of fact, there is one sequence in this movie that is done so well that it is broken into my list of favorite movie moments of all time. Even though this movie is a long movie about people sitting in conference rooms, while sitting in the theater, the movie never lost my interest. I do think that there could have been some changes to the editing just to balance out the two perspectives a little better. If you have not seen the movie, that might not exactly make sense to you, but trust me, once you watch it, you will understand what I mean. A little bit more development for Emily Blunt would have also been appreciated. Otherwise, this movie was incredible. I don't know if it's my favorite movie Nolan has made, but if it's not at the top, it's definitely the runner-up. Every year at Thanksgiving, my cousins and I will discuss some random franchise or genre, and we'll go off on some nerdy tangent about a topic nobody else really cares about. Typically, it revolves around either Disney, Pokemon, or Star Wars. This year, though, we had a short discussion about Godzilla movies and how these movies should stop focusing on human characters that nobody cares about. Because when we go to see a Godzilla movie in the theater, we don't care about the story or if it makes sense. We just want to see Godzilla destroying buildings and fighting other monsters. Then a week later, I saw Godzilla -1 and my entire perspective on this topic changed. We actually got a really compelling and emotional human story with human characters in a Godzilla movie. The movie centers around a kamikaze pilot from World War II who chickened out and abandoned his mission. Once he returns home, he is riddled with guilt, because as another woman in the destroyed town says, it is people like him that caused them to lose the war. His family were all casualties of the bomb, and so now this man has nothing until a young woman and a baby that she took responsibility for come into his life. Even though he does not feel like he deserves a family or a happy life, they build a type of family unit to care for the child until Godzilla comes back into his life and attacks Japan. There are so many complex themes in this movie, starting with the idea of redemption and who deserves a happy life. It jumps into concepts of government and how a system does not care about the individuals that died to defend it, and then also briefly touches upon forgiveness of others and camaraderie. All the while, this movie manages to perfectly capture the scale of destruction of Godzilla, and shows the devastation in a way that few other movies actually have. It delivers as both a compelling drama with deep emotional themes, and also as a big-scale monster movie. It will be very hard for another Godzilla movie to top this, but as long as we can continue to write compelling characters, then I will be on board. So if you've been keeping track, then you know what movie I have at the top of my list. And honestly, this movie surprised me quite a bit. Wes Anderson is very hit or miss with me, as I feel many of his projects tend to overstay their welcome, and even the ones I enjoy usually stay in the middle of my rankings from year to year, as I feel that many of them fail to fully explore the themes that he is trying to convey. Somehow, Asteroid City managed to buck that trend, and Anderson managed to deliver my favorite movie of the year. Just as a quick side note, Wes Anderson also directed my favorite short film of the year in Poison, so I guess he was just having a really good year. As with all of Wes Anderson's movies, the cinematography and set designs are fantastic. There really are no other directors that can imitate Anderson's style, and it helps his movies really stand out from almost anything else. Anderson also has a group of actors that really work well with his writing style, and in this cast we have some big names doing fantastic work. Jason Schwartz, Scarlett Johansson, Adrian Brody, Jake Ryan, Edward Norton, Jeffrey Wright, and Jeff Goldblum are all terrific here, and their delivery matched with the dialogue written by Anderson gives some of the funniest moments of the year. While all of that works fine for Wes Anderson, so far I have not explained anything that sets this movie apart from any of his others. So why is it that I am so hot and cold on previous works, but Asteroid City somehow manages to capture my interest? Well, it all comes down to the theme. Everything in Asteroid City works towards the central theme of the truth that can be found in art and storytelling. We have the framing of the movie, which can be a bit too meta for some viewers, but we can see Jason Schwartz at one point leave the primary narrative and talk to the in-movie director, as well as another actor, about the emotional truth behind the scene he is trying to act in. We have the little girls in the primary narrative who, in order to cope with their mother's death, make up the story of burying her ashes in a ritual to revive her. And while at first it seems like they are devoid of emotion, we can see when their grandfather tries to dig up their mother's ashes from the burial site that they have a very strong emotional response to it. We even have one admittedly very strange sequence in the movie where everybody starts chanting, "You can't wake up if you don't fall asleep," which I take as just telling the audience that you cannot find truth if you don't allow yourself to dream. As someone who has always been very interested in the art of storytelling, and has always believed that escaping into fictional worlds can help to process rather complex emotions, this movie manages to portray that in a surreal and yet honest way. It may not be for everyone, and trust me, as a viewer who typically does not fully enjoy the work of Wes Anderson, I am fully aware of that fact. But at least for me at this point in time, Asteroid City is my favorite movie that I watched in 2023. With that, we have finally finished our look back at 2023. We have officially ranked all of the movies, TV shows, and video games that I had the opportunity to experience over the course of the year. And now we can begin looking towards 2024. If you enjoyed this video, or any of the others that I have uploaded over the past couple weeks, please subscribe for more content. Now that these videos have been finished, I plan on returning to the structure that I had before this major project started, and that will begin this upcoming week with a video game focused video. If there are any other ideas for videos that you would like to see in the future, please let me know in the comments below. And until the next one, thanks for watching.